As the judge, a commanding presence in his black robe, calls the court to order, the air tightens with palpable tension. Today, Taylor Swift's fate will be decided, and the verdict will not only determine her legal standing, but will also test her resilience in the face of overwhelming public scrutiny and emotional turmoil. The day had finally arrived, the moment everyone had been anxiously awaiting. The final verdict in the high-stakes Diddy Court trial. Journalists, celebrities, and curious onlookers filled every seat in the courtroom, the air buzzing with anticipation. Among the crowd sat Taylor Swift, a surprising figure in this saga, unexpectedly drawn into the drama when Diddy made a shocking allegation involving her. Months earlier, Diddy had accused Taylor of wielding her influence to manipulate the media for her own gain, alleging she was covertly working behind the scenes to orchestrate his downfall. Taylor had kept a dignified silence throughout the trial, her expression composed and unreadable. But today, the strain was evident. Her legal team had urged her to remain calm, yet her furrowed brow and tense demeanor revealed that the pressure was beginning to weigh heavily. As the judge, an imposing figure draped in black robes, called the court to order, the tension thickened in the air. Diddy sat at one side of the room, his face stoic and unyielding, while Taylor sat across from him, biting her lip, her fingers clenching the armrests in silent apprehension. After reviewing the mountain of evidence and witness testimonies, the judge finally began, his voice echoing in the silent room. This court has reached a decision. Taylor's heart pounded in her chest. She had fought relentlessly to clear her name, but nothing could fully prepare her for what was about to be revealed. The judge's voice rang out once again. Taylor Swift, you are hereby found guilty of conspiring to manipulate public opinion and engaging in actions that incited an unnecessary media frenzy. The evidence has demonstrated your role in this orchestrated campaign. A collective gasp spread through the courtroom, piercing the tense silence. Taylor's hands began to tremble as her mind whirled, the room seemingly spinning around her. Her world, once filled with the applause of sold-out shows and chart-topping hits, was now unraveling before her eyes. The judge's next words cut through her like a knife. You will be sentenced to, he paused, the seconds stretching unbearably. A year of community service and a substantial fine. For a brief, agonizing moment, Taylor couldn't breathe. The weight of the sentence hit her like a tidal wave. Her chest tightened, her vision blurred, and despite her efforts to remain strong, she could feel the world slipping away from her. She had done everything in her power to fight these accusations, yet here she was, facing judgment she never anticipated. Then, without warning, a scream tore from her, a raw, gut-wrenching sound of heartbreak, anger, and disbelief. It was a scream that reached deep, one that fame or fortune could never suppress. It was a cry born of frustration and pain that no audience could ever fully understand. Tears streamed down her face as she suddenly stood, her body shaking with raw emotion. Cameras flashed relentlessly, capturing every unfiltered second of her anguish. She stumbled backward, her hands covering her face, unable to stop the relentless wave of tears. Her eyes found Diddy, now on his feet and staring back, his expression unreadable. A scream tore from her again, louder this time, as if the court's judgment had struck at the heart of everything she'd built her career, her artistry, and her very voice. The courtroom descended into chaos, whispers spreading like wildfire. Taylor Swift, typically the image of composure and grace, stood before the world, visibly shattered. Her lawyer rushed to her side, attempting to soothe her, but there was no calming the devastation that had taken hold. Taylor, it's going to be okay, her lawyer murmured gently, trying to hold her steady. But it wasn't okay. The verdict had broken her spirit, and for the first time in a long while, Taylor Swift found herself utterly lost. As the courtroom erupted into murmurs, her sobs cut through the silence. This wasn't the end of her story, she knew that, but it was a chapter that would haunt her. Right there, she realized the harrowing price of fame, where even the strongest voices could be silenced by a single, crushing judgment. It was an afternoon that would forever be etched into the headlines. The world had already been gripped by the spectacle of the Diddy Court trial, a saga rife with accusations, drama, and legal showdowns. Yet no one could have predicted the shocking twist that would entangle one of the most beloved pop stars on the planet, Taylor Swift. The courtroom was packed, thick with tension as the judge prepared to deliver his verdict. The trial had been exhaustive, each accusation more sensational than the last, exchanged between Diddy, the music mogul, and his former associates. Taylor Swift, thrust into the legal storm as a key witness, had unwittingly been swept into a whirlwind of battles and relentless media scrutiny the moment her name surfaced in court. What began as a minor involvement, a collaboration gone wrong, a missed opportunity had spiraled into a portrait of Taylor as the alleged mastermind, accused of manipulating events to her own advantage. The accusations had been nothing short of outrageous. Taylor had remained confident that the truth would ultimately prevail. Yet as the trial dragged on, doubts started to creep in. On the fateful day of the sentencing, she sat anxiously in the defendant's section, her normally radiant blonde hair appearing to weigh heavily on her shoulders. Her team of high-powered attorneys murmured beside her, frantically trying to gauge the likely outcome. Yet even they looked uncertain. Finally, the judge rose to deliver his verdict, and Taylor's heart began to pound as a tense silence blanketed the room. "Miss Swift," the judge intoned, casting a stern glance over his notes, "you stand accused of conspiring with Diddy in a scheme to manipulate the media for personal gain. You're charged with obstructing justice and undermining the integrity of the music industry. The court has considered all the evidence, and we have reached a decision." Taylor's hands started to tremble. Clinging to the armrest of her seat, she felt her stomach twist into agonizing knots. Every camera in the room turned to capture her, the lenses bearing down on her like the weight of the entire world. Her fans, unwavering in their support, watched with bated breath, hoping this would end in yet another victory for her. But the judge's next words shattered her world. "Miss Swift, you are hereby sentenced to a fine of $2 million and are barred from working with any music moguls for the next 5 years." An airless silence fell across the courtroom. Taylor's breath hitched, her eyes wide with disbelief as the reality of the sentence set in. The shock ripped through her like a sledgehammer. Never had she envisioned her career being halted like this 5 years with no access to the industry's powerhouses. A sentence with consequences that were unimaginable. For the first time, her composure cracked. Tears welled up in her eyes, and before she could stop herself, a choked sob slipped from her lips. She buried her face in her hands, her chest heaving as the enormity of it all hit her. The courtroom gasped as she rose, trembling. Her attorneys rushed to her side, but she pushed them away, her eyes flashing with desperation as she cried out, "No, this isn't fair. I didn't do anything wrong." Her voice reverberated through the sterile courtroom, a painful blend of despair and betrayal. The sentence had cut deep, and for the first time in her life, Taylor Swift felt utterly powerless. Her anguished cry sent shockwaves across the room. Fans in the gallery began to murmur, some calling out words of encouragement, while others sat stunned into silence. Across the room, Diddy watched with an unreadable expression, a strange mix of guilt and indifference clouding his gaze. Their once friendly alliance had been irrevocably fractured by this trial. The judge banged his gavel, striving to restore order, yet it was painfully clear. Taylor had lost all control, and the world was there to witness every heartbreaking second. Escorted from the courtroom in a daze, Taylor felt the relentless flash of cameras as she was led down the courthouse steps. Behind her, the doors closed, but outside, the world erupted in a frenzy of speculation. Later that evening, back in her hotel room, Taylor collapsed onto the couch, overcome by the weight of the day's events. She stared blankly at the ceiling, her thoughts scattered and haunting. How had it come to this? How had her career, her name, her reputation become tangled in such chaos? She had always been the girl who wrote songs of heartbreak, resilience, and strength. But now, in the face of this monumental loss, she was lost. For the first time in years, Taylor Swift found herself without answers. It was a day no one had anticipated. Taylor Swift, the beloved pop sensation known for her eloquent lyrics and graceful public image, had been reduced to tears and screams in the courtroom. Inside, the air had been thick with tension. The case had taken a stunning turn, and everyone from fans to fellow celebrities to media outlets was watching Diddy's high-profile trial as it reached its critical moment. The prosecution had been relentless. With each passing argument, the tension had grown until it was nearly tangible. Earlier that morning, the shocking news had broken. Taylor Swift, a key witness, was being called to testify about her role in an unexpected business deal with Diddy, one that had allegedly gone horribly wrong. Details were sealed, but rumors had swirled for weeks, and now the moment of truth arrived. Standing at the witness stand, Taylor was nervous but composed, determined to maintain her usual grace. Her bright blue eyes scanned the room, her long blonde hair cascading over her shoulders as she calmly answered the prosecution's final question. But then, the judge called her to step back, and the room fell silent. "Taylor Swift," the judge's voice boomed, "you are hereby sentenced to 100 hours of community service, effective immediately, for your role in facilitating the illegal distribution of copyrighted materials within the entertainment industry." The words struck Taylor like a freight train. Her knees buckled, her breath caught, and she stared forward in stunned disbelief. Her carefully constructed calm shattered in an instant. Years of composure, confidence, and control crumbled. "What?" she gasped, her voice high-pitched and stricken with shock. Her hands trembled as she gripped the stand, desperate for something to hold on to. The courtroom gasped. This was the unexpected twist no one had foreseen, and Taylor was no longer the poised pop star. Tears filled her eyes as the weight of the situation bore down. The cameras flashed, unable to fully capture the raw, vulnerable pain she now displayed. "I didn't," she tried to explain, her voice trembling as she held back tears. "I didn't know anything about it. I swear." The room murmured, but the verdict remained final. Her lawyers scrambled to file for an appeal, but the damage was done. She turned and rushed from the room, the heavy thud of her heels echoing down the hallway. Her security team followed, but she was shaking, fighting back the tears that streamed down her face. Back in the courtroom, Diddy remained seated, his expression unreadable. Had he known this would happen? Was he somehow part of the scandal consuming her world? As Taylor disappeared into the corridor, her screams echoed in her mind. It wasn't just the sentence, it was everything: the public scrutiny, the shock, the betrayal. How had everything spiraled so completely out of control? The media coverage would be relentless. Headlines were already beginning to flash. Taylor Swift's shocking breakdown at Diddy trial, and pop princess falls from grace. Yet, amid the chaos, one question lingered. Could Taylor Swift ever rebuild the image that had made her the nation's sweetheart, or had the courtroom verdict permanently shattered her career? Only time would tell. But for now, Taylor was left with the haunting sound of her own voice as she faced what was likely the most difficult chapter of her life.